Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regulator. Welcome to this week's Regulatory Roundup. The regulators of the week are the 50 states. I don't even know where to begin because there's just so much volume. It's like drinking from a fire hose. So I'm going to go alphabetically. Arizona is proposing a consumer protection rule that is protecting customers from big tech's monopolistic fees, better known as the app tax. New Hampshire has declared an end to the state of emergency associated with COVID-19. In booze news, New Mexico passed a sweeping new rule that allows home delivery of alcohol as a means of creating new revenue streams for hard-hit food and drink establishments. The New York AG, along with 18 other states, wrote a letter to Merrick Garland, the new head of the Justice Department, asking him to reinterpret the ATF loophole that allows the purchase of ghost guns. It's a really cool phrase that basically refers to the ability of bad guys who otherwise couldn't buy a gun still be able to buy guns that are 80% assembled and, of course, unregistered. Rhode Island pushed for and won a massive shareholder campaign to get shareholders to vote to stop a pharma company from paying a bonus to their CEO. Apparently, 85 million shares were cast against the payout because of the company's role in the opioid crisis. Utah signed a whopping 172 bills into law, bringing this year's total of new laws in Utah so far, and yes, it is only March, to 259. And these passed. And finally, West Virginia signed a new law that outlines the legal liability for employers and COVID, meaning when you are liable and when you're exempt for exposing employees to COVID. The topic of the week is climate change. I will stick with the states since we're on a roll there. California is proposing a beverage container stewardship organization that would be focused exclusively on recycling beverage containers. Both the House and the Senate of New Hampshire have competing bills to establish greenhouse gas emission reduction goals for the state and also establishing a climate action plan. Florida's Department of Agriculture put out a warning that due to the crazy storms in Texas, they have a shortage of seasonally appropriate fuel and will be providing winter fuel a lot longer than normal. I did not even know this was a thing. Speaking of Texas, the governor asked for the head of Public Utilities Commission to resign over the failure of power during the crazy weather, and the governor expects to appoint a replacement in the coming days. And now we'll jump to federal, where the National Climate Advisor to the president convened a meeting this week with the leadership of oil and gas companies to discuss shared priorities around the climate crisis. And one of my new favorite agencies to read is the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. I love it because they talk about stuff that sometimes I would miss otherwise, and it's just so hyper partisan that it kind of brings all the issues to life. Well, now, in addition to getting my previously hyper partisan views of Senator Sherrod, a Democrat, on financial regulators, now I'm hearing the voice of Republican Pat Toomey speaking up. And he's really not happy about all these financial regulators pushing for ESG and climate change regulations. He's annoyed that these measures are beyond the scope of the regulators' missions, and he feels that it could put social objectives above investor returns. I mean, there's room for disagreement here on both sides, and I've really enjoyed all the dialogue. There has to be a way to make changes for the better while still minimizing the harm. And moving on to Compliance Corner, which again is the SEC's Asset Management Advisory Committee, one that you'd think would definitely be focused on finance to the exclusion of all else, their agenda is ESG and diversity and inclusion. And since we're on inclusion as well, the New York Department of Financial Services, which also regulates New York insurance companies, put out an open letter to all insurance companies about their expectations in relation to diversity and inclusion. And this wasn't the normal, don't discriminate when you're pricing insurance policies. This was a directive that the actual diversity of the leadership at the insurance companies should be a business priority and a key element of their corporate governance. Similarly, the Fed released a study on gender and social networks in relation to people getting appointed to bank boards. In the non-financial world, both South Dakota and California are entertaining bills having to do with diversity in athletics funding. The FCC is announcing an emergency connectivity fund for educational connections and devices to address the homework gap, they're calling it, during the pandemic. And essentially, they're helping ensure that students' learning is also not a monochromatic activity. And in other news, FEMA is issuing a COVID-19 funeral assistance fund to help people pay for funerals of their loved ones from COVID. Huge news in our fine tracker this week. In case you missed it, Coinbase got fined $6.5 million by the CFTC for false, misleading, inaccurate reporting, and wash trading. The very first North Korean national has been extradited to the United States to stand trial for money laundering offenses, where they use the U.S. financial system to illegally import luxury goods into North Korea. And finally, an illegal shark trader was caught and convicted in New York this week. That's it this week for Regulator's U.S. Alerts. See you every Wednesday morning on LinkedIn and YouTube.